please.
From Cleveland, and collectively we will be moderating tonight's debate. I'd like to welcome everyone to the first mayoral debate of the season. Unfortunately, the mayor was unable to attend this evening, prompting our original sponsor, Father Duke of St. Cyril Methodius Catholic Church, to cancel. However, both Councilmen, Demro and Fitzgerald, are here this evening, and they agreed to work together to keep this event alive. We are especially thankful to Harrison Elementary for allowing us to be here tonight. Let's give everyone a round of applause. As we begin tonight, I'll explain the format of the debate. We will start with 1-minute introductions of the candidates. We then assemble 4 main issues that are highlighted on the candidates' websites and generated one general nonpartisan question for each. The candidates will have 3 minutes to respond. There will be no rebuttal because this is the time to inform the residents of Lakewood. Throughout this time, the audience will be permitted to submit one question using your first name only, your question, and the issue it covers. Index cards can be found in the doors. Stephen will be collecting and grouping them. When I have concluded my questions, Stephen will take over the submissions. Know that we will not be able to read everyone's question. Please be patient. There are information tables in the back of the gym where you can find additional resources. As the clock starts, I ask for complete silence. Thank you. Mr. Demro, would you like to start your introduction?
Sure. I'm Councilman Demro, and I'm running for mayor because I care about Lakewood. I'm running for mayor because 4 years ago, I went to city council with the vision that things would get better. And after 4 years of working very hard and passing tough laws to clean up our community, those laws have gone unnoticed by the administration. They've gone unimplemented, and as a result, our city has been allowed to run loose. Our housing situation is out of control, our crime is spiraling, and our parks are in absolute disarray. As a lifelong resident, and someone who's very committed to this community, I couldn't sit idly by and run for city council and sit there for another 4 years. I believe we can do better, I know we can do better. And that's why I'm running for mayor of the city of Lakewood.
Thank you. Mr. Fitzgerald.
Thank you very much. First of all, I want to thank the sponsors and parishioners for St. Cyril's and Methodius for taking the initiative to sponsor tonight's event. I want to thank each and every one of you for caring enough about your community to come here this evening. There's an absence here tonight. There's a rather noticeable absence of one person, and that's unfortunate. But what's more important, I think, is an absence of leadership for the last 4 years on the crucial issues that we face today. We only have a few moments to introduce things. We're going to hear from you. What's important isn't just that Mr. Demro and I are up here on the stage. What's important is that you're here. And it's a job of anybody that aspires to leadership in this community to listen to you. So this evening, as we talk about the big issues that our community is struggling with, crime, taxes, housing, and whether or not Lakewood is going to move forward or whether it's going to start slipping, whether we're going to start losing the competition that we're in with other communities. That's what we have to talk about tonight and we have to struggle for answers with. And I'm happy to be here to listen to your concerns and try to answer your questions tonight. So thank you very much.
The first issue tonight is streets. We'll start with Mr. Demro.
When I ran for city council 4 years ago,
I'm going to ask questions.
Question. My apologies.
You have 3 minutes to respond. What do you think are some of the issues Lakewood residents have with their streets, and what would be your solution?
Well, the #1 issue is they can't drive it. They've got potholes the size of a toilet bowl or larger. They've got, huge rut and base issues. The fact of the matter is our city doesn't spend enough money on the streets. And when I ran for city council 4 years ago, I said that we would do more. And we've done more, but it simply hasn't been enough. In my mind, what we need to do is we need to move back to the tried and true system that was used under Mayor Kane and Mayor Sinagra, back to the history of Lakewood of assessments. Nobody likes it, but frankly, at the end of the day, it'll bring in new revenue to the program, and it will avoid the 33% income tax increase that the mayor has proposed to fill the gap, to meet the capital needs of the city. You're already paying the tax. It's called the front-end alignment. It's called the new hub cap. And it's not fair because your city has not planned intelligently. Councilman Demro and I, along with others, have worked to bring intelligence to the program, authorizing the pavement condition report, where now instead of politicians picking the streets, we have a scientific basis determined by ODOT as to the condition of our streets. So it's really all about resources and having a leader who's dedicated to long-term planning and additional resources.
Thank you. Mr. Fitzgerald?
Well, I agree with Councilman Demro that you have to experience the quality of our streets to truly get a feel for what's going on in the community. There are a few streets that have been fixed and been fixed appropriately, but we've seen a decline both in the workmanship that's done on some of the streets, that they're not lasting the way they used to. And we've also seen, and it's not just this mayor, really there's been politics that have been played with the street repair system that we have for the last, I think really for the last 20 years. What it comes down to is this: what do you prioritize in the city? What are the roles of the local government? Well, one of the first roles of any local government is just make the city accessible. I mean, that's a basic service. And what's happened in Lakewood, I think, is that we've gotten off track. We've been trying to fund this program and that program without taking care first of the very basic functions of government. One of the basic functions of government is to put enough of your budget into the street budget so that you have decent streets to travel. What I've tried to do on City Council is every time we've gone through a budget cycle is we've tried to put more money into the streets budget. We've tried to cut money from administration. But it's been very difficult because, especially in the last 4 years, every time we tried to put more resources in the streets, the mayor's response has been, the only way we're going to solve the street repair problem is to increase income taxes. Again, we're competing for our residents. Every day, our residents make a decision about whether they want to live here or whether they want to live in another suburbs. And there are many different factors that go into that. Safety, taxes, and also your streets. If somebody's paying high taxes, and they can barely drive down their own street, that just isn't good enough. They're going to end up opting out of Lakewood. It's going to hurt our tax base. There's streets in Lakewood right now that have been waiting 40 years to be fixed. 40 years. And people's patience is running out. So what you need is you need a new mayor who's going to say, look, there are certain basic things we're going to get done. We're going to make the city safe. We're going to make sure that the infrastructure is taken care of. And that's our first function. And that's what you're going to get if you get a new mayor.
Next issue will be crime. We'll start with Mr. Fitzgerald. What is your perception of the crime problem in Lakewood and the police response to it? Should the police be more aggressive in their tactics?
Perception is, I'm glad you used the word perception. It's important to get beyond perception and talk about what's really going on in Lakewood. Let me tell you a story about something that happened a couple months ago in City Council. We had a number of residents come down to a council meeting and tell us their personal stories of what was happening on their street, how their streets had changed in the last few years. It wasn't perception, it was their reality. And the current administration's response to that was, well, that's your perception, but that doesn't fit the reality. So what we did was we said, fine, if that's what you're saying is just their perception, let's get statistics on it. Any good law enforcement agency is statistic driven. You have to know where crime is, how it's happening, when it's happening, and who's committing it. And I know that from about 8 years full-time experience in the law enforcement profession, as both an FBI agent and as a former prosecutor. need to do is we need to start taking a neighborhood-based approach and start changing our strategy. We have the same police strategy, frankly, in 2007 that we had in 1977, but we don't have the same rate of crime and we don't have the same type of crime, and so we have to adjust to that. I think we also simply need more police officers. We've been basically going around 90 police officers, just short of 90 police officers in recent history, but our police officers are twice as busy. So I don't fault the police force, but I do fault the political leadership in this town that for too long has been unwilling to even acknowledge the issue, much less propose solutions for it.
Mr. Demro.
There is no doubt that crime is increasing in the city of Lakewood. As Councilman Fitzgerald states, the statistics clearly reflect that, and they're irrefutable. If you're going to use a data-based approach to crime, you need to have it implemented in your department. 2 years ago, City Council authorized city staff, a database management tool that can be used in every department in City Hall. Yet, the mayor has not taken the leadership role to bring into safety forces. Safety forces have been left untouched. As mayor, we will implement city staff in every department within 6 months. The city of Buffalo did that. Other cities have done it faster. There's no excuse for it. I don't know what his excuse is. There are 3 principles that have also been used by mayors across the country to decrease crime. Neighborhood-based policing, getting police out of their cars and onto the streets, into the commercial districts, into the neighborhoods, so they get to know who lives there and who should be there and who might be up to trouble. Another piece is the use of that real-time data, that we stop tracking things on a map at the end of the month, but that as soon as a police report is uploaded out of a car into City Hall, we have a GIS mapped so we know where's auto theft occurring, where's burglary occurring, where's assault occurring, so that you can rapidly redeploy your resources. Giuliani used it in New York, his chief William Bratton, who went off to Los Angeles, did it with a smaller police force. Finally, zero tolerance. We have to send a message that we ain't fooling around. Lakewood used to have a reputation that you didn't drive here with a broken taillight. You didn't turn right at the wrong stoplight on red. We've lost that reputation. And until we get it back, we are sending a message to people from other communities that, hey, Lakewood's a target. It's a great place to do business. As far as tactics go, the second part of that question, we should always be fair. We should always follow the tactics that are available under the law. No one should be using heavy-handed or racially biased tactics. We will be a fair police force. We will be a firm police force. And frankly, it takes someone with a record on crime. I'm the author of the city's only sex offender law, which passed unanimously through council. I'm the author of the city's only chronic nuisance law, targeted at absentee landlords and problem tenants, passed unanimously by council. And finally, I was the sponsor of the unanimously passed new curfew law within the city of Lakewood.
Thank you. Third question tonight is about property. Section 8 housing is a concern to many longtime Lakewood residents. Do you plan on keeping it the status quo, or will you attempt to change it? Mr. Demro.
The status quo. I'm about changing everything, just in case anyone was wondering. And to some people, that's a threat at City Hall. And that's fine, I understand that. But frankly, what we're doing now isn't making it happen. So with Section 8, here's what we're going to do. 2 years ago, this administration signed an agreement with CMHA. That agreement and federal rules that were already in place empower us to pull Section 8 vouchers from homes that have police calls. And at Mr. Fitzgerald's safety meeting, we asked the law director how many vouchers have been pulled. And they didn't know. And then the answer was none. So at the end of the day, it's clear to me that we're probably not even going to monitor these households. So it's clear to me that first, we have to live up to our pact with CMHA. We have to properly police and patrol. But the second piece is, if you properly enforce my chronic nuisance law throughout the city, regardless of whether you're a Section 8 tenant or a live-in homeowner. We have laws in this city, and they're intended to maintain a quality of life. And unless they're enforced, our city will fall apart. So that's really the heart of the matter, is treating everyone equally, not just Section 8, but cracking down on those who intend to terrorize our neighborhoods, be it through the condition of their home or through the activity of their home.
Mr. Fitzgerald.
The first time I ever remember Section 8 being discussed at a city council meeting was about 3 years ago. I asked the administration at that time, what is the current rate, what are the current numbers of Section 8 properties, and how much have they gone up? And we got a lot of resistance. First of all, they didn't have the statistics. Then they had the statistics and didn't want to give us the statistics. Here's what's going on here, folks, and I think you're going to hear a theme throughout the night about this approach to progress. If you can't even talk about an issue, you're never going to solve it. You think there's ever been a city that wouldn't admit it had a crime problem but then solved it? Do you think there's ever a city that had a housing problem and had a problem with Section 8 but didn't even want to admit it and then solved it somehow? So what we've done is at least we've put it on the table and forced a discussion on it. Now, in June we had the first of these public safety meetings that we had that I served as chair of the public safety committee. And Councilman Demro is correct. I asked the law director, how are you enforcing the Section 8 agreement? And the answer wasn't just, I have to correct Brian about one thing. The answer was, we don't know. The answer was, we don't even think such an agreement exists. And when I pointed out to them that I had a copy of the agreement with the mayor's signature on it, they asked to take a look at it. Well, you know, it's just not supposed to work that way. Something has gone wrong here. Now, here has been the steady response that we've always gotten from the administration, that Section 8 is a federal program and there's nothing that municipalities can do about it. That's not true. What other communities have done is they've taken a portion of their building department. Okay, so let's say in a 10-person department, they'll take 2 individuals and they'll say, you are assigned to Section 8. You're to follow Section 8. We want to know where it is. We want to know if it's in complete compliance with housing codes. We want to know if there's any criminal violations that have happened by any residents there. And if there are either housing code violations or criminal violations, we're going to take it to CMHA because we have an agreement with CMHA that says they're then supposed to lose their certification. Now, has that worked in other cities? Yes, it has. It has. Even cities like Cleveland Heights, Shaker Heights, Euclid, they all have acknowledged that they have a problem and that they have to do something about it. And that starts with tough enforcement and enforcing the laws that you're agreeing to with CMHA. I've got news for you. CMHA is not going to do this on their own, okay? They're not going to say, gee, I wonder what's going on with Lakewood. Maybe we should check up on it. It doesn't work that way. We have to look out for ourselves. We have to be the best advocates for ourselves. And that's one of the best things that a mayor can do, who's going to be an activist mayor, is he's going to push the county bureaucracy, he's going to push the federal bureaucracy to stick up for Lakewood on all these issues we're talking about with Section 8 in particular.
Last issue is taxes. Property taxes are very high in Lakewood. This is affecting the elderly, the young, businesses. How can we resolve this? Mr. Fitzgerald?
Well, here's how you start. You do not have a tax increase be your first line of attack. I still remember, I'll never forget it as long as I live, when the mayor was elected in 2003, we had our first budget hearing with him in January of 2004. And that's when he revealed to us at that time, not during the election campaign where he'd been elected, but he revealed to us in January of 2004 that he was pushing for a significant income tax increase. And that has been the steady refrain over and over and over again. Both Councilman Demro and I have opposed that. We agree about that. You have to have a fiscally responsible approach. What I've done is I put out a 10-point plan on taxes and on fiscal responsibility. And I'm probably not going to have time in 3 minutes to go through all 10 points, but if you look at the information I put out, it's listed there. We have to have a 2-part approach. Number 1 is you have to implement city staff fully, and you have to implement any efficiencies that you possibly can, either through sharing services with other municipalities, trying to shrink the size of government. You know, about 80 to 85% of our budget every year is on personnel. That's why we aren't left with much funds left growth in local government, and you do the things that we've been pushing this administration to do to grow our local economy, then you have a chance to at least put a brake to the tax increases. And that's part of the answer, I think, to the property taxes. Thank you.
A quarter of the city's budget comes from the property tax. Half of the city's budget, in terms of revenue, comes from the income tax. And the other quarter is from intergovernmental transfers, state and federal money, private foundations. I agree with Councilman Fitzgerald, and that's why I led the effort to stop the mayor's 33% income tax increase. Because there should be no question that people in Lakewood are already taxed highly enough. I was proud to lead that effort, as I was proud to lead the recent effort to place the county sales tax increase on the ballot. Taxation is not a route to prosperity. Cuyahoga County is the third highest tax county in the nation, and the third highest tax state in the nation. It just isn't working. There's no economic development groups. We can only regionalize and shrink ourselves down so small before there's nobody left. And I believe that while we cannot particularly control property taxes, I think that as Lakewood grows and builds on its assets in our new library, and our new schools, and our new law, that we should look for ways to have a property tax rollback. It was recently done by my good friend Josh Mandel, who's now a state representative in the city of Lyndhurst. It's not impossible for us to consider rolling back a tax or eliminating the escort tax, which prevents businesses from locating in the city of Lakewood. These things are very real. We see results that happen when certain taxes are implemented and certain taxes are cut. So at the end of the day, I think we need to have a mayor who's looking at financial sustainability. And part of that includes tax cuts in addition to cutting at City Hall. The real question in the next budget cycle is core services. It was a question that I asked, and Councilman Madigan, I know, was beating the drum of core services 2 years ago, and this administration resisted planning. And now we're looking at a $2.5 million deficit next year. The mayor doesn't tell you that when he sends out his balanced budget updates, but it's coming. $2.5 million is roughly 10% of our city's workforce. So we will have to cut a budget in a reactionary stage because we didn't do planning. So what's it going to be? It's not going to be police and fire, I'll tell you that. Maybe it's going to be your backyard pickup. Maybe it's going to be your senior services. Maybe it's going to be youth. I don't want to see any of those cut. I didn't want to see any of those cut 2 years ago, and that's why Councilman Madigan and Dennis Dunn and myself, we offered strategic planning, and it didn't happen. It's not too late. We can still have a strategic plan. We can still plan for the future. Listen, 4 years is 4 years. We need to be in the mode that the library is in and the school is in. We need to look out 50 years.
Thank you. Now we'll be taking questions from the audience. Stephen will come in here.
Hello, my name is Stephen Stewart. I'm a resident of Cleveland. And each candidate will be asked a question, and I have 2 minutes to answer this one. And again, no rebuttals, as it was in the first part of the program. As quickly as I could, I compiled all the questions in this one big question. I sorted through it, I got the most commonly asked questions and tried to paraphrase them into a simpler question. In 1 or 2 cases, I wrote down verbatim the question that was asked because it was phrased particularly well. You'll know who you are. Okay? All right. The first first question will go to, I'm sorry, but who answered the last question?
I think I went first.
Okay. So this one will be for Mr. Demro first. How do you plan to deal with the absentee landlord problem in Lakewood? Is the city inspection problem effective enough?
No, it's not. And I pushed in the last budget cycle for more inspectors, and my council colleagues, thankfully, and of course I agreed, it was the right thing to do to have more inspectors. Unfortunately, I'm afraid that that department isn't managed properly. And so when I'm going door to door and I'm knocking on the door and I'm seeing a housing occupancy license from 1999 and the house is in shambles, I have to ask myself, are we hitting the target? No, we're not hitting the target. So how do we deal with it? First is to modernize that department, to put away the note cards and the clipboards and to move into the modern era of technology. And the mayor bragged a lot about bringing walkie-talkies into the Division of Building and Housing. Okay, that's 1955, guys. Okay. We're looking at PDAs, we're talking about uploading reports, we're talking about using our personnel time effectively to keep them out on the streets where they can do more inspections and not in an office in the basement of City Hall typing reports and issuing citation letters. It just doesn't make sense. Part of it too is having a more electronically driven environment where people can get their permits and their approvals online. The inspections and appointments can be done online so that we can connect with the most highly connected community in northeastern Ohio. There's a reason AT&T is here, okay? And so ultimately the other piece of it is meeting with those landlords before they get their occupancy license and then getting a lesson from a licensed teacher about what are our expectations in Lakewood. You want your license, you're going to come down and you're going to sit in an auditorium with me for half an hour and I'm going to tell you all the expectations. You put your trash out on your tree at this time, you keep your porches clean, you paint your house, etc., etc. And then we're going to tell them about what we're going to tell them about the things we're going to do for them. We're going to put people who've been evicted online so you can see who not to rent next time. We're going to offer you discounts for security background checks.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. Mr. Fitzgerald?
I think that the key is when you're talking about absentee landlords is you have to look at what their motivation is in the first place. Why does somebody who doesn't live in Lakewood own a property in Lakewood and rent it out? It's simple. They're trying to make money. It's an income-producing property. The key to correcting their behavior when they're not maintaining the property is very simple. You hit them in the pocketbook. That's what you do. And you do that through very effective and aggressive enforcement. I think we have an appropriate number of building inspectors, but what we don't have is we don't have any sense of priority. So the local property owner who has some rust on their downspout, let's say, is just as likely to be targeted by the building department as the person that lives in Bay Village who owns a double which has been run down for 3 years. And I've talked to people in this audience, I've talked to many people in many neighborhoods here who have burned up the phone lines to City Hall saying, will you please crack down on these individuals who are running my neighborhood down. But if you don't live in this town and you're continuing to get your check and you're continuing to make money off of it, we're not going to get your attention. Now, here's what I would propose. We need to change from a complaint-driven system to an accountability system. So instead of having X number of building inspectors that are going to respond to whatever complaints happen to come across their desk at any one time, the building inspector is going to have accountability for a neighborhood. Every neighborhood is going to go through a yearly audit. There's supposed to be a certain quality that we're going to demand to be enforced in that neighborhood. And that inspector is going to be responsible to make sure that that standard is adhered to. That's the key to turning the situation around with absentee landlords.
Thank you, Mr. Fitzgerald. Okay, Mr. Fitzgerald, you can answer this one first. Do you have any ideas on filling the empty storefronts in Lakewood? Or do you have a plan to attract businesses to Lakewood and keep them?
I sure do. Anybody that drives up and down Detroit, Madison, next time you do it, I invite you to count the number of empty storefronts. And the really unfortunate thing about that is commercial office space is one of the prime jobs of local government. Economic development is just not on the map. But all these things are interrelated. All these things go to the health of the neighborhood. If your storefronts are run down, or if they're vacant, it's going to affect the quality of life of all surrounding neighborhoods. All these things are interrelated and interconnected. So I think the theme of what we're talking about here is you have to be able to do all these things at once. Economic development is linked to crime, which is linked to infrastructure, which is linked to aggressive government services. All these things are connected. There's a web that is supposed to protect the community. And economic development is something that we can do if we're willing to put the resources into the programs.
Thank you. Mr. Demro, same question.
If you're going to encourage business to come into our community, you can't do it with a strong arm. In talking with Todd Marshman, who owns Fish Window Cleaning, a new business to Lakewood, he told me his first experience in our city was from a building inspector who walked through his storefront door and said, "That sign's out of compliance. No, welcome to Lakewood. Thank you for bringing your employees and your income tax dollars here. By the way, we might have to do some work on that sign." It was, "Your sign is out of compliance, the citation letter's in the mail." It's not encouraging. Our city has to have a better storefront program than just simply, let's put up some shiny nice awnings, let's repaint the building. We need a storefront renovation and a small business program that focuses on the infrastructure of our community. Most of these buildings were built 1910, 1920. Their time has passed. Their structure is beautiful though. And so to maintain our history, but to create a path to our new century, what has to happen is we have to offer dollars to update electrical systems and plumbing systems and to stop the basements from flooding, which is a key space for inventory for small business. We have to be able to give them dollars to connect to technology. And the one thing you can't do in the city of Lakewood, which is what the mayor did, is you can't defund the land acquisition and parking funds to balance your budget. That's what he did. And so therefore, we're saying, you know, we really don't care about parking. It's not good for economic development. The streetcars aren't coming back. We have to battle, we have to fight the places like Crocker Park, and therefore we have to be modern within our historic area.
Thank you. Mr. Fitzgerald, how can we attract businesses to Lakewood?
You want to hear it again?
Okay, next question. It's a little difficult to phrase, but for Mr. Demro, given that you have high property taxes already and the income taxes are going to increase, why should a couple of more than moderate means, for instance, empty nesters or childless couples, why should they move to Lakewood?
Well, in my future as mayor, income taxes aren't going up. We're going to plan, we're going to go through a core services exercise. I've pledged, as I believe Councilman Fitzgerald has, to not increase taxes. That means you've got 2 out of 3 podiums that say, we're not increasing taxes. So the answer to that question, I'm not really certain. All I can tell the person who asked the question is, I have a record of fighting taxes. I stood up and explained to the community in community meetings why what the mayor was asking for wasn't good. What he said he was asking for and what he was actually asking for. If you go to my website, you can click on his tax ordinance. He said it was for streets. But when you opened up the ordinance and looked at the language, it said streets, personnel, parks. There's a whole litany of things, which basically meant we were going to give him a $2.5 million slush fund. I'm sorry. When you can't manage the money you've got, you don't hand the kid more money. That's just it. So in my mind, fiscal responsibility is right up there behind crime for me at City Hall. And we're going to manage our money very well, and we're not going to ask Lakewood taxpayers for more.
Thank you. Mr. Fitzgerald, why should a couple move to Lakewood given the high taxes?
Well, I would base that on the conversations I've had with folks in all my years as being a city councilor, but particularly in this last year. If you ask people why they believe in Lakewood, why they've chosen to stay here and retire part of what a job as a mayor is to tell that story effectively. You can't tell that story if you're not here. You also can't tell it if you don't realize that that's part of your mission. Communication is a big part of being a mayor. And so that's part of it. Now, you're also not going to stay in a community where you don't feel safe. You're not going to stay in a community where you feel like property values are slipping because you have an investment in your property. You're not going to stay in a community where there's vacant housing and you don't see anything being done about it. You want to stay in a community where you think that the government, you're getting 100 cents for every dollar that you put into taxes. And that's what's happening in Lakewood, and it's to be quite honest with you, it's been disturbing. And during the course of this campaign, there's a lot of people in this city who are starting to lose faith with our quality, our standards of quality in this city. And if we lose them, who's going to take their place? That's what we have to ask them. Because there's a ripple effect there. Because when you lose them, then it's going to scourge your tax base. And one thing starts to lead to another. So the next mayor has to have a lot of different skills, a lot of different skill sets. Yes, you have to be against taxes, but you also have to be able to do all these things simultaneously in order to reassure people that this is where they want to live. We still have a lot of good cards that we can play. It's a great community, and we just need to put the right leadership together to get it done.
Thank you. Now, question, Mr. Fitzgerald. This is a question I probably would have asked, even though I don't live in Lakewood, but I drive through Lakewood a lot. How will you address the poor condition of Lakewood's roads and side streets? Will you be able to find the money for repaving if necessary?
Well, I wish we could tax people to just drive through the city. Maybe we should look at that. Look, here's what's going to happen. If we have a new mayor, in January of 2008, a draft budget is going to be released by the new mayor. And the infrastructure repair is either going to be a priority or it isn't, right? And there's no fancy way to do it. There's no magic solution to it. It's either going to be a priority or it's not. And it just hasn't been. Now, there's been a lot of street repair that you've seen happen coincidentally right before this election, right? And most of that was funded because your water rates went up by about 30%. What's been happening is our water fund has been used to pay for that. We also, this mayor happened to be given by the previous mayor about a $3.8 million surplus, which is all gone. Okay? We're facing a deficit next year. So the next mayor is going to have a nice welcoming present of instead of $3.8 million to spend, we're going to have to figure out ways to be more efficient. Look, we're going to go through a very tough time, I think, for the first year. We're going to have really responsible leadership. We're going to have to try to get all these things done at once. But I do believe that the resources are there, that if we commit the proper amount for our budget, for infrastructure repair, that we can do it. Now, here's one thing that we have to talk about tonight that's also important. There's state and federal money that's out there for infrastructure repair. We have to be extremely creative and effective when it comes to getting that. I'll give you one quick example. I've got about 10 seconds left. We got about $1 million in funding for improvements at the lakefront, which was an effort that I worked on with a number of citizens. We can be creative about that when it comes to getting state and federal funding, and that will help us. It won't solve the entire problem, but it will help.
Thank you. Mr. Demro, how could you address the paving of roads?
Well, once again, it's all about long-term planning. As Councilman Fitzgerald mentioned, the mayor ramrodded through City Council $500,000, $500,000 in street repair, suddenly before the election. And it was an emergency ordinance that had to be passed immediately. As a member of the Public Works Committee, I had a little over 72 hours notice, and I was being asked to approve it without a single council meeting to see if those were the next streets on the list, what the extent of the repairs were. And I was the only council person to vote against it. It was poor planning. It shouldn't have been approved. It's a sham. Those are asphalt recycle repairs. They'll last about 3 to 5 years if you're lucky. So if you're on one of those brand new streets last, it's not going to last. We just spent a lot of your money, good money after bad, or bad money after good. So the solution has to be long-term. We have to stop looking at year after year, capital budget after capital budget. We need to look 50 years out. What will our parks look like? What will our streets look like? What will our city hall facilities look like? You have to have an infusion of money. I don't believe it's coming from the state. I don't believe it's coming from the feds. There isn't enough money to go around. As I said before, I believe we need to go back to the tried and true method of assessments. We come and do your street. 30 years later, we come back and we do it again. At the end of the day, that's part of where the money went. When the city council and previous mayors decided we're not going to do assessments anymore, all of a sudden we started running out of money for streets. It's a user fee, it's most appropriate, and it's not a permanent tax increase.
Thank you. Okay, now a question to bounce back into history in the room. This one has to do with the West End project. For those of you that don't know, that's where the city tried to use eminent domain to take people's houses and compensate them the fair market value in order to put in, I believe it was shopping malls or some sort of a business enterprise. Okay, that's not the explain. Why did the West End project fail? And would you pursue a similar project if you were mayor?
The West End project failed in my mind because of leadership. It failed because of heavy-handed tactics. I wasn't on city council, so I can't say that I was privy to all the information that Councilman Fitzgerald was, or the mayor was, when he voted for it before he voted against it. I think that's our history. 4 years ago, it's over. We should have now learned our lessons from it. But we're 4 years later. Where's the next project? We spend $63 million every year outside the city. That if we were spending those dollars here, those would be part-time jobs for people. Not promising health care and factory jobs. I'm just saying, we're already spending this money. Why shouldn't we be able to spend it here? That's where I'm at with this. I don't believe in the use of eminent domain for a project of that nature. I supported that project. I just believe that we would never have to have gotten to eminent domain had we had a mayor with the compassionate leadership ability to say, listen, a few $1,000s more, we'll find it. Or moving expenses aren't enough, okay, we'll make it happen. Okay? But that wasn't the case. It was, we want this or else. Nobody likes the government in their face like that. And that's not the kind of mayor that I'm going to be. Unless you're an absentee landlord.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Fitzgerald. The West End project?
Well, it failed because, simple answer, it failed because when it went on the ballot, it got less votes. Now, why did that happen? A lot of reasons. A lot of reasons. Part of it is what Councilman Demro mentioned, that there's a real resistance to having government come in and dictate what people are going to do with their private property. Part of it, we have to take from that experience and say, okay, how are we going to learn from that? Have we learned from history? One of the things that I learned from that is that communication is essential to being a leader of this community. If you're going to have a major development project, you have to get the residents on board first. You can't parachute in and say, this is what your neighborhood is going to look like. So I hope you like it. That doesn't work. You have to build consensus in a neighborhood before you have neighborhood change. Now, have we learned that lesson? That's the question. Have we learned that lesson? Well, right now, there's supposedly a major development that is supposed to take place around Kaufman Park. Right? And some of you may live in that neighborhood, and some of you may not. But we're repeating the mistakes of the past. If you talk to the people on Virginia and French and in the areas surrounding Kaufman Park, they don't know what's going to happen there. They've been told that there's a plan, but they can't see it. They've been told that there are developers, but they've never met them. Now, if we should have learned one lesson, it's that from the whole West End situation, whether you were for it or against it, and the mayor was against it and then he was for it, maybe it'll take a little longer, but you'll get something that the community can really support.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Fitzgerald, could you please explain a specific instance where you have identified a problem, developed a cost-effective solution, and followed through and implemented the project?
Yes. About 5 years ago, a citizen approached me and said, Ed, there's if you go down to Lakewood Park, you'll see there's a construction fence sitting there where the fishing pier used to be. And we ought to do something. I went down there, I traveled down there with a citizens committee that had formed up, and we started brainstorming about what can we do about this. Well, what we did was, as I just said in my last answer, we involved the people that were interested in that issue, and we put their talents to work. And what they did is they ended up coming up with a grant proposal that was proposed to ODNR, which is the Ohio Department of Natural Resources. And we ended up getting almost $1 million in state funds. Now, I do agree with Councilman Demro, those funds are hard to come by, and you're not always going to have a solution like that. But what we did was we leveraged our local talent, and we were able to build something. Now, some of the money is still sitting there. It wasn't implemented as well as I'd like to see it. But that's an asset now that we didn't have before. And how did we do it? We did it by using local talent, by forcing our local government to do things they've never done before. They've never worked on a project like that before. We got a lot of resistance from City Hall. There's a lot of people that said, we can't do this kind of project. Well, they were wrong. They were wrong because they underestimated the talents of our local population. I'm telling you, the citizens did 90% of the work on that project. So that's one example where we took some local dollars, but by using them, by having a plan, by using local talent, we were able to leverage that and build something for future generations. Long after Mr. Demro and I have passed for the city, whether that's in a few months or a few years, that will still be there. And it's a monument not to what I did, but to what government can do when it works with its citizens.
Thank you. Mr. Demro, could you please explain a specific instance where you have identified a problem, developed a cost-effective solution, and followed through and implemented the project?
For 10 years, our community struggled over the construction of a skate park. 2 children died during that time period. And you had a lot of people who were much older than I am in City Hall who fought, it should be here, it should be there, not my backyard, not my backyard. Okay? At the end of the day, the Lakewood Skaters Association came to me as a new council person and said, listen, we've been trying to do this for so long. How do we make this happen? And I explained to them, it's very simple. There are 8 people at City Hall who need to make this decision, and their time is up. So they organized. They ended up out at all the festivals and things that occur in Lakewood. They raised money, they raised dollars, they built an organization. And then it came time to take it to City Council. And I tried to make the case, and I worked very hard to make the case. And then there was a committee meeting about approving Lakewood Park's master plan. And we fought hard to get that skate park put in there. And every single council member voted it down. And then a week later, that plan went to the council meeting. And I organized, and I moved, and there were people beyond fire capacity in that room. And every council member saw what that skate park meant to this community and changed their vote. And $300,000 later, 10 years later, there's a skate park at Lakewood Park where those kids can do what they do best. And frankly, in a community that's facing crime issues, we have to embrace our youth. And there's no one better than the person who sat on the Blue Ribbon Task Force for Youth Master Planning for the last year and a half, working with our other institutional partners in our community. I've been focused on how do all youth and families thrive in this community. And that skate park was a piece. And there's no one better, I believe, in this race than a person who's worked in our Lakewood City schools, a teacher, to connect with our youth and to ensure that they have a strong future here.
Thank you. Now for this second last question. You don't have to use the full 2 minutes. In fact, I expect just about 30 seconds or so. Mr. Demro, do you have an opinion on why you think the mayor is not here tonight?
I was advised to think for 2 seconds before I answered, if I didn't know what to say. You know what, everybody makes a choice as to how they want to run their campaign. I believe our campaigns are about connecting with people. And the mayor, by not appearing here tonight, has made a conscious decision not to connect with the people of this neighborhood and the neighborhoods of Eastern Lakewood. At the end of the day, there are no major community events tonight. Because if there was, Ed and I would be there. So you'll have to decide for yourself what this means.
Thank you. Mr. Fitzgerald, do you have an opinion?
Oh, sure. He did not confide in me, so I was going to hear. But I have seen a bit of a pattern, unfortunately. And it didn't start with this debate, and it isn't going to end with this debate. Let me give you a couple quick examples. Okay? When we had public safety hearings, I'm talking about our public safety committee. When we had public safety committee regarding the curfew law, the mayor did not attend. When we had public safety, he's the director of public safety, by the way, that's one thing we haven't mentioned. In this city, the mayor serves as the director of public safety. Some cities, you have a separate person that handles those responsibilities. In this city, it's the mayor. When we had a public safety committee regarding a new drug trafficking ordinance, the mayor didn't show up. When we had a public safety committee meeting with citizen participation that we had about 250 people at, the mayor didn't show up. When we had part 2 of that meeting, the mayor didn't show up. When we had a I shouldn't say when the citizens themselves had a Black Watch meeting at Roosevelt School about a month ago, and there's over 150 people there standing remotely in the gym, the mayor didn't show up. There's different leadership styles. There's leadership that trusts the people and wants to involve the people, and there's leadership that is afraid of uncontrolled variables because it doesn't allow you to control your political message. It all depends on what's going on in your community. When the community needs to be listened to, and when the community is seeking to be heard, you have to have a leader that listens and responds.
Thank you. Okay, actually the last question tonight, I'm simply going to ask you to summarize. You'll get 3 minutes for this instead of 2 minutes. You can give a summary of your position and why you think people should vote for you for mayor. And I'm going to flip a coin to see who's going to go first here. Mr. Fitzgerald, you get to call a coin flip in the air.
Heads.
Heads has been called. Heads has been called. It's tails. Would you like to go first or second, Mr. Demro?
Please let Mr. Fitzgerald go first.
Okay, Mr. Fitzgerald, you have 3 minutes.
This is like Jeopardy playing for the lightning round or something. I think when you're looking at a new mayor, there's a couple things you need to consider. First of all, you need to consider about whether or not the person has the qualifications for office. I have about a 20-year history of public service. It's something that I've cared about my whole life. It goes from everything from working for the U.S. Congress, to working for state government, to being a special agent with the FBI, to being a Cuyahoga County prosecutor, to being involved in local organizations, and being one of your city council people for 9 years. I think probably more important than all those things is I have a personal stake in what happens here. I love this town. And I have 4 kids, and I want them to raise their kids here. My family's been here since 1929. I want my kids to keep it going. But I'm worried. And what I see as I talk to people across the city is I see people who, just like me, they love Lakewood, but they're worried. They want to see a new mayor do something about the problems that we talked about here tonight. And the attendance here tells you that people in this section of town, and all the sections of town, really care about the city. And they're not willing to give up on it. They're not willing to give up on any single street. They're not willing to give up on any single neighborhood. We can do things. These problems are not totally intractable. We can do something about these problems. We can make the city safer. We can hold the line on taxes. We can do something about absentee landlords. How do we know this? Because other cities are doing it. Other cities are doing it, and we're not. We don't even have the leadership to some things that are unpopular, but if you work with me, we can make it through some tough times and we can turn the corner on Lakewood. There's still so many assets that we have in the city, and we still have time to do it. But that's what this election is about. We're right at the tipping point. We're either going to go in one direction or the other, ladies and gentlemen. You've got to make a decision about whether or not you're happy with the status quo or whether or not you're going to change. And if you want to put the right person in there that has the experience, the ability, and the passion to get that done. I think I'm the kind of person, and if you support me, I'd be honored by your support. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Fitzgerald. Mr. Demro, would you like to summarize your position?
My position is I love Lakewood and I also have a stake here. I actually love here. I've been here for 28 years and I love all 28 of them. And I plan on being here for at least 28 more. This is my community. I went to these Lakewood City Schools and I taught in these Lakewood City Schools and I'm proud of that. I haven't been on City Council as long as Ed, and I haven't been in Lakewood government for 20 years as the mayor. But at the end of the day, it's not so much how long you've been there, but it's what you did with your time. I believe that you should be looking for a candidate in this race who has a demonstrated record of results. Not someone who's simply going to talk about what they want to do, but someone who can say, this is what I'm going to do, and this is what I already did. On crime, sex offenders, curfew, and chronic nuisance. On housing, I wrote the city's only vacant and abandoned housing law so we could do something about those properties. I was the one who had to stand up and fight the fight simply to make sure that people would put their trash out on the tree lawns at the right time so our city would not look like it's falling apart. And it passed through City Council. That skate park is there for a reason, and those kids are thankful for that. Lakewood Center North, that skyscraper that made that horrible noise out into those neighborhoods of St. Charles and Bell Avenue. Those people dealt with that noise for 20 years while the mayor was their councilman. It took one councilman 7 months and a Lakewood judge to declare them guilty. But had I not stood up for those people, had I not stood up for those kids, these things would not have happened. You need a mayor who's going to get in there and give immediate results. Not 4 years, 365 days. You need someone who's got the time and who's got that energy to get in there and clean house. I don't have ties. That's one of the advantages of having someone who's youthful. I don't have anybody who's ready to step in and be my law director or my public works director. I haven't been around politics long enough to be corrupted. You're getting the real deal here, people, and I'm going to love working for you each and every day. And I hope that you'll vote for me for mayor on October 2nd.